Namaste, hi. Today we are going to be talking about how to reject thoughts. Remember, this part of the talk is regarding a meditative practice that we would have to be involved in, which means I would need your concentration and it would need a little more alertness to hear these concepts, to think about them, and to practice them. Now, thoughts. Thoughts are there in us as a very dominant part of our personality. They define us. We come across moments in life where there are certain thoughts that are not in favor of us, or certain thoughts that keep clinging to us and we would want to get rid of them. They're like a scar that sticks, and that scar has to be removed. That is how closely negative thoughts stick to us. There are ideas, methods, and practices that we can have to reject thoughts. Rejecting thoughts is not merely pushing them away or throwing them off. Before we go into it, I would like to talk about a few things regarding thoughts which you should know before you attempt to reject them. There are certain concepts that have to be understood because they deal with the laws of the mind, and I will narrate them. First thing to know, we should never hide ourselves from our thoughts. Thoughts become stronger when we shut our mind's eye to them. They become the subconscious thought and hide deep down to become an unconscious force in our being. It's beneficial to have a conscious scrutiny over our thoughts, especially when the thoughts are weakening us or pulling us down. If we have to ask, what are the kinds of thoughts we would want to reject? The answer is simple. Thoughts that are unpleasant, or thoughts that we once allowed to play in our mind. We've nurtured it, and now it has no value to us. In fact, it is an inimical force, an opposing force in us. That is why we would want to reject thoughts. Now, there's something we would have to remember when we attempt to reject thoughts, and that is, no thoughts stick to the mind unless there is an attraction to it. Either the thought that we have will have something that we like, or there will be a dislike. So there are two things, like and dislike with a particular thought. Both of them, both the like and dislike, are different sorts of attractions, but attractions nevertheless. And they exist in us as different energies and have different results or expressions in us. The thought that we like rouses us, and the thought that we dislike makes us sulk. But in the end, one thing we can see for sure is that both these thoughts and their effects exist in us as energy. So the focus from the thought to seeing whether the thought is a thought that we like or dislike has to be brought to the idea that we now start recognizing it as energy, because it plays out as energy, plays out as keeping us on a high or pulling us down. Now, we should never reject thoughts saying that we dislike them and push them away. That makes the thought stronger. Like I said, it's an attraction, and it remains even stronger. So even if we say, I hate a thought, hate is a sort of energy that has attraction in it, and it remains stronger within us. In fact, it should be seen as something that is of no use to me. There has to be a neutral view of seeing the thought, understanding it, that this is of no use to me, rather than I hate this thought. This understanding is very important. So if we have to understand it, we will have to see that that energy we would have to de-energize. So we see from thoughts to likes and dislikes, to feeling the energy around it, and finally de-energizing the thought. So this is the insight that we need to have with regard to a thought. So eventually we would have to de-energize the power around that thought. Now I just said energy. How do we understand energy with a thought? You can feel for yourself. When there is a thought that you like, we see that the energy comes out from us, the liking energy comes out from us and then goes around the object that we like, and there's a desire to pull it close, there's a desire to bring it in. And the energy that we dislike comes out from us and wants to disintegrate, wants to dissipate, wants to break out. We can feel that energy. It does not want to come back in. This is a feeling, a very tangible feeling in us. So how do you de-energize the field around a thought? The first thing definitely is to understand that it is of no use to me. That concept is supposed to be very clear. If there's jealousy, if there's hatred, and I don't want that thought anymore, then it's clear that I do not have any use of it in me. This conviction we are supposed to fill ourselves with day after day. Next is making the will. What do we mean when we say making the will? It is a resolve that we take within us. We should ask ourselves, what kind of energy would we like to have? The answer should be a peaceful energy. There has to be a strong need that I want to harbor a peaceful energy. Only then the mind will be ready to let go of a thought that is making it restless or that is sulking it. Make the will loud and clear that what's more important to me than anything else is peace. The mind should learn that. This is making the will. Next, suggest this idea to the mind. Thoughts of love, goodwill, and peace creates an energy of peace in the mind. Thoughts of hatred, blame, and criticism creates an energy of restlessness in the mind. Thoughts of excitement is definitely a very tempting energy to entertain, but in the end we are left with emptiness and despair. Knowing the end to be as such, reject the idea of excitement and stick to what brings peace. This suggestion is to be repeated and to be fed into the mind. The next is the most important step, but that requires for us to go deeper within ourselves. That is, you have to observe and de-energize the thought playing in the mind. When you observe a thought, you should be able to feel the energy around it. In meditation, you can get closer to not just the thoughts and your likes and dislikes, but you can get closer to the energy around it. And that has to be practiced. You have to make repeated attempts at feeling the energy purely as it is, bereft of your thoughts and your ideas about it. The energy of hate or the energy that we dislike, you will clearly see moves, as it were, from within to outside, and it is designed to wreck and destroy. That is what the feeling of dislike or hate energy is. Get familiar with it in daily practice. Stay as a silent observer and try as much to not get associated with that energy. You will gradually see that you have the power to simply feel the energy without being dragged closer of like or without being thrown away by the energy of dislike. You can simply feel the energy as it is without being moved along with that energy. The power of detached observation gradually loosens or weakens the energy around that thought. There's an observer and there's a thought. As we continue to observe it, the power of observation weakens the energy around that thought, and eventually we will be free from the energy around that thought. That thought may remain, but the influence that thought has over us in the form of energy will slowly start to weaken, and eventually it'll be gone. The third process takes time, though it is very necessary to do. But the first two, making the will and making the suggestion to the mind, itself is a very good process. And when thoughts are not so very strong, where we can simply observe and we can talk to ourselves and release ourselves from that thought, this method of simply making the will and suggesting to the mind brings us great good and takes us way forward in our control and management of our thoughts. Thank you for listening. These ideas are very powerful and they have been practiced, and there is an obvious outcome that can come if it's practiced well. I hope this video benefits all and people can become more happier and peaceful in their lives. Thank you for listening. Thank you.